All right, I'm way, way down here so that you can see the the drawing board. So that's the deal. I'm gonna draw Roman Emperor Tiberius. He was Emperor number two, a deserving moniker because he was an absolute evil, disgusting, perverted piece of shizness. And he wasn't the first choice for Augustus to have succeeded him, but the other ones kept getting killed and dying and stuff. You know, these things happen. And apparently, even Tiberius himself wasn't immediately all that keen on being emperor, but his mommy had other ideas. And she had married Augustus, who was originally Octavian, but changed his name once he became emperor. And eventually, Tiberius, last man standing, I guess, got the title. And you know, he had been in the military and you know had some campaigns and all the stuff you gotta do to at least measure up somewhat for the role. But ultimately was that he was basically adopted by Augustus. That put him in line to succeed him. So that's how he ended up being emperor. I suppose at first it was just business as usual and whatnot, you know, as his duties in running the show and all of that. There's still holdouts wanting the Republic to return. It never did. That sort of thing. But this was still early on. Obviously, Julius Caesar would have been the first emperor, but he, you know, and he essentially was until they, you know, the Senate murdered him, and the Civil War began, and his heir apparent, Octavian, joined up with Mark Antony, and what was the other? It was similar to Cassius, but it was Crassus, I believe. Anyway, they formed. There had been. This was the second triumvirate they formed to wield power between three men. So originally it was Julius Caesar, Pompey, and Cassius. Cassius had died. He'd been captured in a campaign in Syria, I believe. Supposedly, I guess by all accounts, they forced molten gold down his throat, and the means by how they killed him. But anyway, he was dead, and so that left Julius and Pompey to duke it out on who would be top dog. And so Civil War broke out over that. And then ultimately Caesar proved to be the winner. And his title was basically dictator. That's where the word comes from. But ultimately, he was the absolute power. And the Senate didn't like that. And so it was kind of left open as to where things would go. But it was obvious Julius was not going to release power or anything like that. And that's kind of the problem. Even if you were of the mind to, you know, pursue that or whatever, once you're that powerful, typically you're kind of stuck there. Now, in his case, I'm sure he wanted it. But anyway, he ended up being assassinated by the Senate, and then the second civil war begins. After that, a new triumvirate is formed with Mark Antony and Octavian, and were able to defeat and Crassus, I believe. I'm forgetting the third guy. The third guy always gets forgotten, you know. And so they were able to defeat the factions that, you know, conspired to kill Julius and all that. And after that was over, well, now you got a split between the triumvirate itself, primarily Octavian versus Mark Antony, so they weren't allies anymore. Mark Antony hooks up with Cleopatra. Cleopatra had Caesar's son, so this made him a potential heir to, even though he was never crowned king or emperor or anything, but still, you know. Meanwhile, you know, Octavian was claiming it, any heir to rights of Caesar's house or what have you. And so, you know, the war was on, but Mark Antony and Cleopatra lost. They ended up doing themselves in, and that was that. Octavian won, and thus Rome was his. And now he put on, you know, a play like he was a humble servant of the people and stuff like that. People say it was, yeah, of course that was all an act. He wanted the power, you know, he went to war for it and all this sort of stuff. But he had the attitude that that was a good way to assuage and pacify any potential fears that could turn people into deadly enemies. And so he's crowned emperor, the first emperor of the Roman Empire, no longer a republic. And he takes the name Caesar Augustus, because he was going to be an august ruler, leader, what have you, and all that. And by most accounts, you know, he had the basic sense of trying to be a responsible leader and that sort of stuff. But, you know, the usual soap opera power and stuff, no doubt, took place. But, you know, they could have done far worse than him, and they would soon. But during his reign, you know, pretty much managed the ship as good as anybody that they, you know, that was available, if you will. And so all's well and good. It was just a matter of who would succeed him. He had like Germanicus and people like that he kind of wanted, but you know, they didn't survive. So eventually, it comes down to Tiberius, primarily because of his, largely believed, his mother, because, you know, Augustus had married her, so, you know, there you go. And ultimately, it's Tiberius. He succeeds him, and there you go. But eventually, Tiberius was mostly known for his own weird perversions. The story goes that he had a perverse interest in children, if you will. He had this, I don't know, this pool in his palace, his private palace, what have you. And there would just be, you know, kids running around naked and all this sort of stuff. So he was quite the monster in that. But well, the empire was doing all right and thriving, so, you know, everyone just sort of, well, he's the emperor, so look the other way, you know. Oh, no. Yeah. So in the midst of all this, and it's largely believed that perhaps one of the kids perhaps abused was eventually became his heir, which was Caligula. So he's the next one. And for Caligula, for the most part, it seems people were quite excited about him taking the reins when he eventually did. And it seems like the early days, it was kind of all right. But then he gets this fever and nearly kills him. And they figured, oh, well, it's a young man, but he's really sick. And it doesn't look good. And it's pretty bad. We don't really know what the fever could have been. Maybe it was like meningitis or something like that. But it was very serious, and it very nearly killed him. But he survives. The fever breaks. He recovers seemingly. And, well, not really the same man after that. So some of the aspects of it is that if he was abused of the likes of Tiberius and stuff like that, that would no doubt do something to his psyche and whatnot. But compounded by that is whatever this illness did that might have had some neurological damage, stuff like that, because he really goes off the rails. And it's quite nuts. There's some suggesting that maybe he was crazy like a fox and was keeping people at edge or whatever, but I mean, there's some thinking there, but ultimately his actions is what doomed him. But I'll table that for when I do a stream on drawing that guy of Caligula. Tiberius, I guess you just have to chalk it up. He was always a perv. I mean, and there's stories aplenty about Roman orgies and stuff like that. There was quite a few. It was just like the order of the day and normal to, houses of prostitution and stuff. Even though in the writings there were people who were very condemning it, and this is long before Christianity and the like takes hold, and it's acting like, oh, everybody was screwing around, and it wasn't smiled upon. It was more of kind of a secret type, not so much secret thing amongst the elite, very much like today, But yeah, a lot of people was like, because the obvious detrimental things of that, you can't maintain a family, and of course Augustus was big on that. He wanted people to raise families and all that because it's overall good for the society that they're building and maintaining. So becoming obsessive about fetishes and the like, or that sort of thing, it just doesn't really make for a great relationship. Certainly not one to raise children in. It's not like hey, that's just what everybody does. No, people were very disgusted at Tiberius's predilections and habits and what have you. But they couldn't really do much about it because he was the seat of power and literally seen as a god. The deification was something early on. They started that under Augustus. And once you had a statue made of you, essentially, you were a deity. And the belief was that you would take your place in the heavens with the other gods and that sort of thing, and be added to the pantheon, so on and so on. Now, Caligula, of course, would take it to extremes when he came along, went nuts. But that's how powerful the emperor was. Now, eventually, that's all in the psyche and whatnot. Eventually, if you don't have, and this is always true, if you don't have the military, then you're done. And Caligula would learn that the hard way. Too late to do anything about it, but you know. But for Tiberius, well, he came out of the military, so I'm supposing, at least on that, he had some amount of respect for it. And that would garner some loyalty. And from the troops and, generals and whatnot, and they would, like, all right, that's his thing. I'm not fond of it, but, we got a good thing going here. I'm not going to rock the boat, and we'll just look the other way. I really don't want to know anything about this. I mean, I do, but boy, it'd be a big risk to try to stop it, because he could order my death just because he feels like it, because he's the emperor. So yeah. Nobody really did anything. They all talked about it, though, because it's just too much of an account to say, oh, come on, really? Yeah, really. So, and then it's like, oh, well, was this too much power? And it goes to one's head, and they just get bored, and they start doing weird shit. I suppose there's something to that. I mean, it's kind of like trying to explain the excesses of rock stars and stuff, and some of them, start playing for the other team when they never did before. And it's just, well, got bored with the basics. Yes, I don't know. But Tiberius, that's a whole other level, and just evil. But he does have, not just being the second emperor of Rome, but between him and Augustus is the years of when Christ was upon the earth. Jesus was born during the reign of Augustus, and he was crucified during the reign of Tiberius. So. Interesting that these moments would take place at the same time, But anyway, that's probably nothing of what he looked like, but it's what I got. I've got an image of a bust of him. There's a couple of statues of him. There's people tried to do depictions of what he might have looked like, but anyway. Something of that nature, and that'll be Tiberius. So I'll put it into Photoshop and color it, and continue on for the next stage of this image. I'm letting the ink dry a little bit before I erase all that, and then I'll switch to an episode of the Bayou Crime Report, which will be featured in the Mr Nailsin Show for Wednesday, the podcast, because I stumbled upon a story and I said, boy, this one sounds familiar. And then I realized, yeah, this guy had been busted before, and he's still doing the same thing. So I went and found the old episode, and found that I had done artwork for it and everything. So it came in handy to make a video out of it. And so I'll put that all together in there and repeat the original, at least the audio, on the Nailsin Show, and then follow it up with the new one. And then there's another Bayou Crime Report episode in there about terrible teachers in the state of Louisiana getting busted for all kinds of nasty things. And then a new episode of Night Night. So that'll make for the Mr. Nailsin Show, which will be posted on RadioMisfits.com on Saturday and wherever else you get your podcasts. So it's great fun. All right, let me go ahead and take out the pencil. Now, there's all kinds of documentaries and stuff, and there's plenty of those for free on YouTube, and they're all pretty damn good. They all, got it fairly. Most of the details, every now and then, just one that doesn't cover this or that and that kind of thing. But for the most part, the basics, and some are quite in depth. And every now and then, when you go from one to the other, there's a little something extra. Oh, I hadn't heard that part yet, and that kind of thing. So it's all well and good. But when it comes to a more or less fictionalized, and it just has to be, you have to guess. I mean, of course, there's Shakespeare and Julius Caesar and all that, but a great mini-series that was made in the, I guess, late 70s, early 80s, something like that, was called I, Claudius. And it's absolutely brilliant. Now, the production is quite simple. It's shot on video, very much akin to like a daytime soap opera, which is fitting because that's kind of what it is. It's like Dallas of the ancient world. But it goes through for Augustus and Tiberius, then Caligula, and finally Claudius, the title character. And it's really told through his eyes and whatnot. It was well documented that he had written a history of the Republic. He was very, prolific in his writings, and yet none of it actually exists. It's referred to, so it did exist, and that he had kept a log or a journal or whatever of the events, and but it's just gone. It's lost to time. So the idea of the I, Claudius story was told of guessing of what it would have been. And based on the actual events, something of the nature that takes place within the series surely happened, because certainly the deaths and everything are historically accurate as far as they did die. And so on and so forth, as to whether or not, like Augustus was poisoned and this sort of thing. Well, it's possible, that kind of thing. But it's a great, great series. Very well performed, very real engaging, and even though it's rather simple, there's no, like I said, the production was sort of daytime soap opera level. It doesn't matter. The performances are that damn good, and so it goes through each era there, and then how Claudius ends up. And it's an interesting thing because he was a lame. He had one of his legs was I guess malformed, didn't quite work right, and he had a severe speech impediment. And a lot of people just assumed he was an idiot, and they didn't take him very seriously. But he was around, and this worked to his advantage because no one perceived him as a threat, and so that kept him from getting killed when everybody else around him was being murdered and assassinated and all this sort of thing. And then ultimately he winds up becoming emperor through no fault of his own, because the stories also of the historical record was that once Caligula goes down, the Praetorian Guard finds Claudius hiding in one of the rooms, because it's like a whole rebellion has happened, and he's terrified that he's going to be murdered as well. But the soldiers instead decide to declare him emperor. And the reason they did this is they had a good thing going, being the Praetorian Guard, which was the special guard for the emperor. But they had turned, most of them anyway, on Caligula because they had enough of his bullshit. And so they find Claudius, and so they declare him emperor because they wanted an emperor. And because they didn't want to just go back to being part of the military and go to different fronts and all that sort of thing. Because we got a good thing going here. It's nice. We're in Rome, and we can hang out here and live the good life. And so there you go. And then it turns out, maybe Augustus was on par with it, but Claudius was a really good emperor. He really did manage well, and he was beloved by the people. Even the Senate loved him. And so there you go. But some of that probably goes to him being a humble man. He didn't have the typical arrogance and whatnot. But before all that happened, you had to get through Tiberius, this disgusting human being. And then, we finally got rid of that bastard, and then here comes Caligula, so. But anyway, these are the things that happen when playing with power. So, I guess I'll move on to the Bayou Crime Report video, and I'll put Tiberius here into Photoshop, but I gotta have to scan it and all that stuff. You don't want to see any of that crap. Why, that's really boring and noisy. So we'll jump over to Bayou Crime Report. The title is Diaper Bandit Strikes Again. Oh yeah, it's a diaper. Well, he doesn't steal diapers, but they do play a significant role in the execution of his crimes.
And now it's time for the Bayou Crime Report. Sicko busted a third time for allegedly pretending to be disabled to get diaper changed. Dear God. Hey, I'm Red Neckerton. A Louisiana sicko was hit with human trafficking charges after allegedly pretending to be disabled online to lure a nanny into his home to change his diaper. It's a foul trick he's already been busted for twice. He just can't quit getting his diaper changed. That's what gets him to shoot his goo. In more ways than one. Rutledge, that's right, his name is Rutledge Deese the Fourth, 35, was arrested after using an online nanny service to request help caring for someone with special needs in order to coax the worker to a Lafayette home. Oh, dear God. But when the victim showed up, the alleged trafficker pretended to be disabled, telling the worker they needed to carry out duties consistent with infant care, including his diaper changes. Deese was charged with one count of human trafficking. He was previously arrested for pulling the same stinky ruse in 2019 and 2021. The wacko was placed on probation in 2020 after pleading guilty to 10 counts of each of sexual battery and human trafficking for posting fake ads online, falsely claiming he was seeking home health care for his 18-year-old brother, whom he described as mentally and physically disabled. Well, definitely got some mental crap going on. But anyway, police said he posed as the brother and got off when the home care aide changed his adult diaper. God damn. Deese was cuffed again in 2021 after pretending to be a younger man with special needs, undergoing alternative therapy, and offered to pay a babysitter to change his diapers. It attempted to persuade the victim to recruit others to care for him. He pled guilty to human trafficking the following year and was sentenced to 10 years behind bars with 9 suspended. When he was released, he was ordered to serve 5 years probation. Deese is now locked up at Lafayette Parish Correctional Center. Authorities encourage anyone with information to call the Louisiana Special Victims Unit at 504-310-7012. I mean, I don't know if you want to admit that you changed this dude's diaper and that you fail for this shit, but I mean, they gotta keep him in there, you know? They gonna keep doing this. And I guess, the trafficking is that he tricked these broads into coming to his house, so, he didn't really traffic them by going and getting them and hauling them across around and all that. No. He just called him up and said, oh, I got this messed up brother and I need some nurse to come in and change his shitty drawers. So she shows up, and it's just some dude with a raging heart on has got some fetish for some broad to come change his shitty drawers. I guess they eventually noticed that and called the police. Oh, God. Oh. Man, I'm going to need a minute after this. This one's sick. He's still doing it. He'll probably do it again. Anyway, for the Bayou Crime Report, I am Red Neckerton, reminding you to keep your goddamn holes clean and do it yourself, sick bastards. The Bayou Crime Report is a presentation of Nailsin Productions. All right, here we are over in Photoshop, and you can see some of the images that I had for Tiberius. But first, Susan Dolan says, top of the morning. Hi, Susan. Good morning, says John the Beagle Dad. Happy Friday. Oh, Friday. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Oh, crap, it's Friday the 13th. It is. Holy crap. Now what am I going to do? I got to go to work tonight. All kinds of stuff could happen. Well, I've done it before, so maybe it'll all work out. Anyway, Susan and John saying hi to each other. Susan says, hopefully Jason does come to your house tonight. Remember, it's not Halloween yet. Well, yeah, but he does Friday the 13th. I don't know. I'm not, now I'm all messed up and scared. Anyway, back to Tiberius. So there's, he probably didn't look anything like this. That's a little too much, but he might have, maybe they got the nose right. I don't know. But, and I do believe, they painted those, so all the paint's worn off. Anyway, that's his statue. This is a bust. He looks a little younger. And this one, it might have been done earlier. Who the hell knows? And he does look like, And then this is some, I don't know, AI image of what he was supposed to look like. Whatever. I don't know if that's what color eyes he had, but we'll go with it. So, here we go. It's Tiberius. So, let me see. Did I? Nope. All right. So we'll go through the dry brush filter. The dry brush filter, because apparently it solidifies the black lines. Yep, it does. All right. So, first things first, we'll put some skin on here so that there's good. Not the game, the face. There we go. Put some color there.
as there would be shadow. Shows depth, you understand. Yes, yes. And then we'll go over here and add a little more. As indicated by the line of the nose being here, it means the light source favors this side, you know? At least that's the idea. And there we go. We'll get his ear. And all this here. Guess. So I always go through this and I think, oh, well, could just color the whole thing and come in afterwards to lighten areas up that I want. And maybe that's for the best. But a lot of times I just leave it blank because I always think it kind of looks cool. But whatever. So anyway, I'll go ahead and color it like that. But then add a few more defining details here. Cheekbones, some of the wrinkles forming, all that. And we'll go ahead and color in the ear, even though it might not have much to it, since the light would kind of drown that out. But, I colored it anyway. Around here. All right. So this would be like the mug shot after he gets busted for, you know. But he couldn't back then because, well... So let's see here. Might make it a little on the gray side for the eye color. There we go. And then his hair. And I'm forgetting how long his reign, lasted. It was a good long while because, he was kind of fairly young guy. I mean, in the I, Claudius series, he's kind of played by a guy who's almost middle-aged, I think. But, or maybe not. I mean, I might be remembering that. I need to rewatch that. That would be a good series to do Nailsin ratings videos on. And it certainly depicted, like, he wasn't, it was mostly his mother was the driving force to get him, so that she, even after, Augustus died, according to the series, well, never mind, I won't spoil it for you. But, so now she had to live through her sons, or, son here in the case of Tiberius. There was a brother, but, whoops. And so that's why, she wanted him set up as the heir and become the new emperor and all that. So now she's able to have power through him. And especially since she's, the driving force to make this happen, so on and so forth. She does wield a lot of power when he comes into his own. And then, he's, kind of stuck there with it. But says, oh boy, the stress and everything. Oh, that must have been what drove him to pursue the disgusting habits of his. No, that's not an excuse. I suppose you could put it into an explanation of why to pursue it to that level to where you're actually acting out on it. Or was it just the boredom because you could have any woman you want? But he's like, hey, I'll try this instead. You know, I don't know. But it just goes to show you talk the biblical accounts. You know, Paul talking about how decadent and disgusting Rome was. Well, he had a point. So no one was really sad to see him go. But they weren't out of the horrors and troubles yet, you know. So yeah, I think now the series does depict it like he, you know, oh well, you know, he got old and died. Well, yeah. So, but eventually, your usefulness to anybody else who's also living vicariously through the emperor's power, and this will always be the case when it comes to power. And the scenario changes to where, you know, you're defending the guy completely because it maintains your own power. But eventually when it becomes, you're better off with him dead to continue on because he just doesn't have it anymore and that type of thing. Well, then that's the end of that guy. And that's typically how that plays out, even unto today. So it's always, you know, if you get too caught up in it or delusional and whatnot, can you really trust anybody when you're at that level of power? And the answer is typically no. Some cases there might actually be family and that sort of thing, and an actual friend. But the draw of power and stuff, why can't I be that? Why can't I have that? You know, that sort of thing begins to overpower any kind of sense of loyalty or friendship and whatnot. And of course, no one can really hurt you as much as an enemy can. An enemy can't do as much to you as a friend can. You know, when a friend turns, you know, an enemy's one thing, but a traitor, well, that's an entirely different thing. And it's always a possibility. A lot of times it's that Twilight Zone episode that had Peter Falk playing basically Castro. So he starts killing his own guys because there's a mirror there, and the dictator, who was always supposed to be Batista, you know, is telling him that the mirror was, you know, enchanted or whatever. And it'll always tell you, you know, who your real enemies are and stuff like that. And you can never, you know, you can't trust anybody. You can't ever rest and all this sort of. And there's truth to it in all these cases of when it comes to power, because there's so many people want it and all of that. But even people that, you know, you trusted completely, people you even liked, and then the paranoia is almost immediate because everybody wants what you got, and more times than not, the only way for them to get it from you is for you to die. So that was the, you know, the story. He kept seeing plots forming in the mirror, even though it seems like in the story, the plots, well, they weren't really happening at all. He just, you know, but the mirror played on his own paranoia. It's like, you know, where did it come from? Why? That's not really explained or anything, but it seems like it. What is it? Does it do this to keep power in check? And it's one of those things that might become the self-fulfilling prophecy. Like most of the tragedies and whatnot where someone has a prophecy of doom and the character does whatever he can to avoid what the terrible outcome would be. But in the process of trying to avoid it, he ends up ensuring that it actually happens. It's kind of like Anakin Skywalker in Revenge of the Sith. You know, he was terrified that he had a vision of Padme's death, and he was determined to do whatever it took to ensure that it never happened. But through his actions, to achieve the power that if she did die, he could bring her back and all this sort of thing, he ended up causing her to die. You know, and the whole, you know, the Empire forms and all that stuff. And that's the nature of tragedies, that you're doomed no matter what you do. I mean, it'd be interesting if someone actually figured it out and said, you know, I'm just going to do nothing. And it's like, well, will the fate still happen? You know, because it's supposed to be this lesson of, you know, there's a certain arrogance in thinking that you can control your fate ultimately, other than what choices in life you make and stuff like that. But you're not, if you're fated to have this fate, there's no way for you to avoid it and whatnot. And it was always like that, you know, trying to avoid it, you cause it. So that's part of the paranoia of power, that it haunts leaders and drives them a little. Part of the things that drives them nutty. The other part is it's just too much power for anyone to wield, and it goes to their head, that sort of thing. And there's plenty of that in history to that that's true. Some weather it better than others. Quite a few don't, and they don't really. They lose their perspective on things that really matter. They can't. They're isolated so much, so they can't reach their humanity anymore, which increases things even worse. So you think, oh well, maybe at one time this guy wasn't such an asshole or whatever. Not Tiberius. I mean, obviously, to have some kind of perversion like that to that level, and this guy was never any good. But to become so paranoid and distant and dismissive of other people overall, it's not going to make for a great reign. And the people will suffer the consequences of the madness of the leader. Because, yeah, you get all the power, and then it's like, what's next? You know, you guys are jealous of me. I get it all, but now I'm going to lose it, and that sort of thing. It's gonna screw with his head, you know. And I think it's a fair argument that something of that nature undoubtedly occurred with the emperors. So, but it doesn't. It explains it. It never excuses it. Certainly not in Tiberius's case. But that's the other thing about it, at least with Caligula, you know, there's that weird story about the fever that overtook him. In Tiberius's case, well, Now, he doesn't have that excuse. No. So you're just absolutely evil. And I suppose, depending on what Caligula was interested in and how dismissive he was on, became of the people, and even the immediate people around him and whatnot, that was probably already there to some extent, and then it just becomes an exaggeration of problems with him. Once he, I guess, suffered some sort of brain damage. But for Tiberius, it's just, I don't know, he, like I said, he got bored. And nobody could tell him no. And, people were not likely to, well, they weren't going to challenge him. It just wasn't going to happen. And so, it does beg the question of, hey, was he murdered in the end? It's like, well, you could certainly understand why someone would. And there was a certain fondness for Caligula in the early days. The soldiers called him Little Boots because he had little boots that he wore when he was a kid, hanging out there and all that. And so then, he grows up and he's in line of succession. And so for a while there, and he had some popular rulings and whatnot, and then a lot of people were just glad that Tiberius was gone. And but unfortunately, their troubles are not over. No, they had some new ones. New troubles. All right. Let's see here. As the Italians live on the Mediterranean coast and very close to the equator, he would have olive-colored skin. Yeah, well, I'm going with this. I always thought Tiberius died of syphilis he caught in one of his orgies. No doubt he suffered from it. Yeah, and probably, yeah, that is what it is. But the idea that someone could have helped it along while he's in his sickbed. It's not unreasonable to think something of that nature could have happened. Tiberius did have an attempted coup against him. His son had been married to Claudia's sister, who poisoned him. She conspired with Sergianus tried to take over, and it ultimately failed. They take over didn't. That's right, it didn't work. So let that be a lesson to all of you. You are not to do that. No. And in the I, Claudia series, Sergianus, I believe, is played by Patrick Stewart. Oh, yes. Yep. There we go. It's on that one. Okay. I'll go over here. Well, I don't want it all devastated like that. Maybe this one? Or this one? Checking out AI backgrounds that I've conjured up for this image. Guess we'll go with this one. All right. Let's see. We'll take care of all that good stuff, and we'll move him on over to here. All right. Oops. Get rid of that. Get rid of all that. This too. Okay. All right. Few more here. No. There you go. All right, there we have it. Okay, let's see here. Maybe something like that for the separation halftone pattern. I'm gonna add a layer, put that in there, then sketch halftone pattern. There we go. All right, and that is that. Ta-da! This sick creep was running the show for a while until he wasn't, you know? No, Patrick Stewart didn't play Augustus. Brian Blessed played Augustus in I, Claudius. He played Serjanus. It was a weird choice when he's executed, where suddenly the camera takes his eyesight or his viewpoint when they come in to stab him. It's kind of a sudden weird break in choice of it, but that was it for Patrick Stewart. But Brian Blessed, I know, is, you know, Voltan and all that, but that was him as Augustus. And of course, according to that story, Livia poisoned him. Yeah. So that her son, Tiberius, could succeed him. So, according to that, that's how that happened. And if only the records of Claudius had survived, we'd know for sure, because he certainly would have put it in there. But anyway, there we go. So next time I do this, it'll be Caligula, or the Roman emperors. So number 1, Augustus, which I've already done. I guess I could. Do I need to go all the way in here, oh jeez, come on. Is it, yeah, it's that one. There he is. Now, I have no idea, but I just used the bust. I don't even know if he had blonde hair or not. He probably didn't. But anyway, that's the one I did of Augustus. And then we have Tiberius. And up next, Caligula, who was played by John Hurt in the series. And very well. It's a really great show. And he just plays it because the guy was nuts. You know, so John Hurt went full steam ahead on the nuttiness of Caligula, and he does very well in that. So there you go. I just drew a disgusting piece of crap. But that's history for you, you know. The good, the bad, the ugly, you know. It's all there. So anyway, let's see here. No super tips. Okay. Well, thanks for watching. And I got to go get rest and all that good stuff, because I got to sleep the day away so that I can work all night, you know, at work. Yeah, that's where I work. At work. I'm going to put out some other videos, you know, from the live stream I did the other night. So I've already cut those up into individual ones. Did the one about crypto, the super dog, and so I guess I'll follow that up with the there was rumors of the results of a screen test for the Supergirl movie, so I'll put that out there. I do have one on the Spider Noir series that Amazon's doing, but since after I did that, they've released the teaser, and I'm like, well, we'll see. But anyway, there were some images, and I talked about that in the video, so that'll be out. So as the weekend unfolds, I'll have those coming out, bits and pieces, throughout. That's why I do those, you know, because I'm too tired to do them during the weekend because I've been at work all night, and I come home and, I don't want to do anything. Still, I might do so. And here I got this Emperor series thing, so maybe tomorrow morning I'll end up drawing Caligula, you know. So anyway, again, thanks for watching, and we'll do something like that again hopefully soon. Have a good rest of your day, and do be careful. After all, it's Friday the 13th. Which doesn't have anything to do with the bad luck of emperors or anything. It has to do with the bad luck of the Knights Templar. It was a Friday, the 13th, when the French king took action against them and arrested them all, and they ended up being tortured and executed. Yep, that's how that goes. Anyway, but that's another story for another time. Have a good rest of your day, despite, you know.
This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my friend. It hurts to set you free, but you'll never follow me, because This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my friend. It hurts to set you free, but you'll never follow me, because this is the end. This is the end, beautiful friend.
Fellow citizens, we must rise and defend our sacred traditions. Let not the winds of change erode our noble legacy.